All right, so we're going to create a very basic animation in order to learn the interface. So I'm going to go to File, New here, and just do 2D animation and hit Don't Save. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. And let's just start by drawing out a ground line. Now, if you don't like the color or the opacity or the width of your line, there's a couple things to do. You can adjust the strength here. You can change the radius of your line here. See that? You could also do that by pressing the F as in Frank key and adjusting the size. So all I'm doing here is just kind of sketching or drawing a bunch of stuff. It would be helpful though to have my background on its own layer. So I'm just going to hit plus here, and that adds a new layer, and I'm going to move it down here. Now you could just as easily just double click this and type in BG and hit enter to add a background layer. I'm going to move this back down a little bit. You can lock this layer if you don't want anyone to draw on it. You can also create or look at creating some onion skinning stuff, I'll get in a second. So actually what I'd like to do is if you look up here where it says solid stroke and then square stroke, if I draw this out, you can see there's these different presets, right? It creates these little squares along our line. There's also solid fill, which if we click on this and I start to draw this out, you can see based on where my line ends up, I can have a solid filled background. Oops, let me undo that for a second. As long as I don't draw another layer, it assumes that we want this background layer stretched across our scene. Right, so if I want to, if I click on my solid fill here, you can see there's a little stroke color thing. Say I want to add little yellow windows. I'm going for like more of a 1920s animation. If I click or draw around this, actually that's, we'd want to put that on a new layer, but you can, it'll say stroke color here, but in order to activate this, is you almost have to create a new material. So if you look at this and I click this drop down here, you can see there's attributes that pertain to it. You can also move these up and down. There's also another place where we actually create those, and that's under our materials palette here. See how these are located here? So I can hit plus here, and I can just, to add another one, I hit new, and I can name this like yellow, whatever, stroke, or whatever you want to name it. And then down in here where it says base color, I can go in here and I can change this to yellow. So if I'm drawing, you could see it allows me to draw that out. Oops, you know what? I'm not on the first frame. That's probably my problem. Let's go ahead and hit this camera to go back into 3D Moon. So as I'm sketching here on the first layer, you can see I'm drawing on top and I can shade that in. The other thing to pay attention to is if I want to create a brush that does what this one does, I can just turn on fill. Now watch what happens. When I draw, you can see it essentially draws it out for me. Now my base color is yellow, but my base color for my stroke is yellow, but my fill color is black. So let's say we wanted to invert that, where I wanted my windowsills to be black and then my fill color to be more of a yellow. Notice it updates in my scene for me, right? So now I can just kind of go in here and draw stuff like this. So I'm just kind of creating these little windows, 1920s Tomcat style windows. So pretty neat. So something like this. All right, looks pretty good. Now on there's like my fills and lines layer. I can go back up here now and just do a solid stroke. Or if I want to, and I have a specific character that I know is always going to be that way, I can still go back here and then just add another material and just name this one ball. So I'm going to name this my B for bouncing ball material. And say my bouncing ball, oops, sorry, I want to turn on fill. The stroke is a dark purple, so something like this. Darkish purple, and then the inside is like a more of a lavender color, something like this, a little bit brighter. Let's punch that up. And so what I can do now is on my frame one, I can probably just do this in my fill layer here. And I'm going to lock my background because I tend to switch between them. I can just draw that out like this. Then I'm going to press my right arrow. And you can see now it's onion skinning for me. And as it hits the ground here, it'll just kind of do this squashing thing. And all I'm doing is tabbing between my right arrow. Say I want this thing to really squash. And then as it comes back up, it starts to return to that mound size. Actually, let me undo that. I'm rushing it a little bit too much. So it's just starting to get a little bit lower here. And then it starts to return to its normal size. Then what you can see, you know what, let me undo that one. I know I'm rushing to kind of just show you the interface, but it's at the detriment to the quality of our little animation here. All right, now if I can go back and forth to my left and right arrow keys, and you can see that. Now I'm going to hit spacebar. You can see there's my ball, and it's going a little bit quickly. And if you look here under frame, there's a bunch of different frame options here. Here's opacity. Let me drag this up to kind of show you. So this is essentially a lot of our stuff. Now, you can set your start and end time for your animations here. So let me kind of drag this out so you can see that. So let's say we want our end animation to only be about 30. So it'll cap it off there. We can also just kind of scroll our wheel in and then click our wheel on our mouse middle mouse to kind of zoom in, just so we're looking at that area. Let's go through these. If you expand like display, you can hide any other sort of like curves or anything you don't want. You only want to see the keyframed animations. If you're going to have something be a child of something else, we set that up in the relationship editor. This is pretty neat because you can adjust the overall stroke and thickness in the scene. So if I yank this up or down, depending on how I want to do it, but we're not going to adjust that much. Let's take a look at some other things before I end this video. Let's go over to our render settings here. You can see frame rate is 24. If I knock this down, let's see. If I crank it up, look how quickly. Let's take this up to 60 frames a second, and I press play by hitting the space bar. You can see it's super fast. So we can adjust our frame rate here. So let's say we do 24. This is our start and end. Let's see what else we have. Well, this is pretty good too, because a lot of times you say you're animating on 2, I can select custom, and I could just type 12. And now when I play this animation here, I'll play it down here instead of hitting space, so you can see it's a lot slower. And I think that's it for this one. In the next one, we're going to start bringing in a very basic 3D cube, and we'll start to animate with that cube.